It used to be that we would do this imagining game. I bet many of you have done it. That what would you do if you won the lottery? Oh, we dream about everything from paying off our debts to buying a big place in the country with room for horses. But we have a new imagining game these days. It's what are you going to do when COVID is over? And this one's a little bit different because most of us are not likely to win the lottery, but I really do have great hope that sometime much later in 2021, we'll be on the other side of this terrible pandemic. I plan that when this pandemic is over, I am going to kiss my grandson right on his cheek with no mask. I'll go to happy hour with my girlfriends at a local restaurant. Oh, and go to concerts. And I'll travel again. Some of the travel will be for work, like coming to visit you guys in Bozeman in person. I love coming to see you in Bozeman. I really look forward to that again. And some travel will be for pleasure. You know, I went to Scotland on vacation back in 1987. I want to go back again. And while I can still hike up the hill at Arthur's Seat. We talk a lot in our congregations like this. Won't it be great when we can have services in the sanctuary again? I can't wait till we can sing in the choir when all this is over. Take a moment to think about what you look forward to at the Bozeman Fellowship after the pandemic lifts. Just think about it for a minute. Yeah, there are some good times ahead. I believe we now have a new appreciation for some of the basic aspects of church life we might have taken for granted. Things like singing together. Oh, such a simple and yet profound way to connect as a community. Missing this is real for me and for so many other people. And closing down in-person gatherings in our buildings was the right thing to do. I never doubt that for a minute. Different areas of the country have had different levels of impact, but I read the other day that in New York City, 1 out of every 346 people have died of COVID-19. Now that, of course, is a city where it's really hard to stay 6 feet away from everybody else. And the pandemic was particularly horrible. But part of how we live our UU values is to look out for our friends and for strangers and not put other people in danger by continuing to meet in person while a pandemic rages. As they say, we stay apart now, so when we get back together again, our friends will still be there. So yes, shutting down in-person congregational life has been the right thing to do. And yes, we really look forward to being able to open up in-person activities again. And there's something I hear from a lot of folks in churches that concerns me a little bit. Okay, it concerns me a lot, actually. And I get where it's coming from, but yeah, still the concern. I hear the phrase, oh, when we go back to normal, or when we go back to the way it was. The reality is that it's never going to be exactly how it was, nor should it be. This experience has changed the world and has changed all of us. We are called to look at the lessons we've learned, look at the holes that might be in the safety net we've built, and give those areas some attention. And this challenge has showed us ways we've discovered new skills and strengths. We don't want to go back to before we discovered these skills. We want to carry them forward. Now, I am not saying this pandemic was great because we had the opportunity to learn new things. But, you know, if we did learn them, we might as well make good use of the lessons. Well, back to imagining our future. The future of the post-pandemic church. I imagine that every church board will continue to hold most of their meetings on Zoom. Same with other important committees and task groups. There may be in-person gatherings a couple times a year, like retreats and things, but regular meetings, I think, will be remote. Not only will this result in less driving, which can be unpleasant in the dark and in bad weather, but this is important. It means people with children do not need to arrange childcare to serve on the board or other key leadership groups. This is a huge asset in making leadership more accessible to more kinds of people. I mean, just think of a future where every board has the I don't drive at night folks, and the I work during the day folks, and the my kids have to be in bed by 8 o'clock folks. All of those groups working together for the good of the congregation. Oh, that's awesome. And these leaders will be practiced at Zoom, so they have no problem with attending UUA trainings and leadership gatherings. Because more and more of those UUA events will also be on Zoom, because the UUA has learned that our carbon footprint, as well as our budget, are in a much better place when we do more remote gatherings and less flying around in jets. And when your leaders attend these remote gatherings, they can meet their counterparts from places like Alaska and New Mexico and get a broader sense of connection with others doing that good work, just like them. I imagine that the way we think of location will change a lot. One of the things about remote worship is you can attend anywhere you want. You know, in the last few months, I've attended worship in Missouri, in California, and well, today in Bozeman. I mean, I could go anywhere I like. Oh, I was in Tennessee the other day for worship without leaving the comfort of my home. Congregations that offer live streaming of services pre-COVID, they found they were attracting worshipers from all over, not just from their towns. I hear from congregations a lot these days that members who had moved away are now back with them on Sunday morning attending remotely. And you know, some folks just don't like having to get up out of the house on Sunday. Many congregations I've talked with are looking at how they will continue to offer some live streamed or recorded services after the restrictions to in-person worship has lifted. But you know, I think we need to do it well. We need to do it right. This is not just a matter of setting up the camera in the back of the room while real services happen. No, it's a matter of taking our remote worship seriously, like you do, and offering it as part of what we do all the time. I don't know, maybe a midweek online Vesper service in addition to in-person Sundays. I don't know. Different communities will find different solutions. But I say to you, your faraway members and friends do not need to go away when the pandemic goes away. Keep them in your mind and in your heart. They are real. And if you open your mind about your sense of location, you can have a lot more of them. This sense of location and remote relationship also impacts who will physically be in your community. This is a reality of the times in which we live. You know, my husband and I, we both live in Portland. My employer is based in Boston. My husband's employer is based in San Francisco. We have done mostly telecommuting for years. More and more companies have figured out this year that remote employees do not use up expensive office space. And if a job was able to move to remote work during a pandemic, well, maybe it'll just stay remote. I heard on NPR about Zoom towns. They mentioned Bozeman by name. These are communities where people choose to live because it's a beautiful location, has good internet, and they'll just commute over their computer. If that happens in your town, you will have a bigger physical population, and more people may want to come visit you in person. In my imaginings, we have a new sensitivity to contagion in the post-pandemic church. I remember back in my social work training learning about how if there's a piece of trauma in a system, that it will echo for at least 3 generations in the culture and traditions. Like if there's a family that has a house fire, that family is going to be extra careful with candles for a generation or 2 to come at least. I think in the post-pandemic church, there will be an understanding that if you don't feel well, you stay home from in-person gatherings. Maybe if people are concerned, they'll wear a mask, even post-pandemic. People do that in other countries. If they have a little sniffle, they just wear a mask when they go out. We will likely be more attentive to who is touching what at coffee hour. Maybe we'll have a coffee server rather than everyone touching the coffee pot themselves. I expect hand sanitizer will be strategically placed around the building. as it was just before we stopped the in-person gatherings, and we will wash our hands a lot. We'll be sensitive to just how many people we pack in a room for popular events and what kind of ventilation is present when we have lots of people gathering. When we look at building improvements, covered outdoor meeting places might be added because we've learned just how useful those can be. This is not the last germ that's ever going to threaten our safety. We will be watchful and planful for decades to come. And in this period of pandemic, time has been marching on. The movement to recognize the value of Black lives is strong, and it's not going away when we stop social distancing. The murder of George Floyd sparked protests all over the world. Some are still happening, certainly in my city. Going back to the way it was before the pandemic could mean just trying to go back in time to before the outrage we felt watching a man die with a policeman's knee on his neck. I hope we don't ever forget that outrage. Meanwhile, the anxiously awaited report has come out from the UUA's Commission on Institutional Change. This is a group that was charged with providing recommendations for our movement in how to live into our goals of equity and inclusion. And the recommendations are not about writing letters to Congress or even having the right signs on the outside of our buildings, or even what hymns we sing. Many of these recommendations address our struggle with culture as Unitarian Universalists. My favorite line in the report calls on us to have covenant and commitment rather than comfort be the driving force in our congregational decisions. I'm going to say that again, too good to miss. Covenant and commitment rather than comfort be the driving force in our congregational decisions. The report addresses a deep and historic culture of UU congregations. Now, this culture works great for people who look just like me because it was created by people who look just like some of my ancestors. But there are ways that the UU culture pushes some people to the margins of our communities rather than welcoming them in fully. The ways we talk about education as the key to enlightenment, they could easily make a dropout feel very unwelcome in our spaces. There are ways that our congregational meetings with our Robert's Rules of Order, they advantage the powerful and those of the dominant culture, and they silence the sincere and powerless who don't understand the complicated nuances. We talk about how we are above racism in our congregations because so many historically in our faith were abolitionists, or because many of our leaders in the 60s were there to march in Selma and Washington. It is good and fine that we're proud of these parts of our past, but they do not give us a free pass. Not at all. Not all of our history around race is so proud. We hear story after story from UUs of color who felt dismissed, tokenized, or belittled by well-meaning UUs who just don't understand the experience of being at the margins, including so many stories from our UU ministers of color. The post-pandemic church, I imagine, will have leadership that's well connected with resources and diverse in age and background. This will be achieved through remote business meetings and leadership meetings being a norm. The post-pandemic church will consider the world to be their community and find ways to welcome members and friends who attend in person and those who attend remotely. And the new technologies that churches have learned during the pandemic will understand that remote members can give their time, talent, and treasure just like in-person members. And the post-pandemic church will be leaning into a new culture and working hard to let go of some of those traditions of UU culture, the way it's always been. So the congregation is not trying to go back to how it was, but moving ahead into a new tomorrow. I know you folks in Bozeman did some really powerful visioning in 2020. See, not everything in 2020 was bad. You did this great visioning activity. And I imagine that your vision for the future could provide a guide on how you want to be in that post-pandemic time. After all, much of this is in your hands. For those of you who probably don't have it memorized, This is how your vision statement reads. I got a copy. We of the UUFB, knowing that the diversity of our beliefs and background, coupled with our deeply held shared values, gives us a unique and necessary strengths. Striving as a compassionate, just, caring, and supportive community to continually find ways to stay dynamic and receptive to those who seek a spiritual home. Fostering spiritual growth and discovery by encouraging vibrant religious education and exploration for all ages and providing a safe space to discuss, test, and share new ideas. Endeavoring to put our principles into action as recognized leaders who boldly and bravely act for social and environmental justice in our local community and beyond. Remaining at the forefront with those advocating for and enacting personal and community solutions to the climate crisis. Aspiring to be a strong, arcing bridge with local, state, and regional faith communities, collaborating with those who share our common values, and holding creative discourse with those who challenge us in our search for larger truths. We'll move forward into an uncertain future with grace and humility, fostering compassion and love, claiming our prophetic heritage, and making our fellowship, larger community, and the world a safer and better place. Woo! Good job. That's great stuff. These are powerful statements that speak to your vision of a post-pandemic church you want to be. And what a vision I imagine when I read these words. Let's look at just a few of these bold visions. In recognizing your diversity and striving to be a compassionate community that is dynamic and receptive, you're aiming at an awesome future. I imagine a future where, rather than a group of like-minded individuals who enjoy each other's company, you thrive as a multi-generational community brimming with new ideas and new energy. To be, as you say, dynamic and receptive. I see your congregation like a living organism, learning to adapt to an ever-changing environment and embracing new ways of doing things that suit who you are becoming. And all the while, of course, you are thankful for the valuable lessons that were learned from where you've been. When you talk about being a safe place to discuss, test, and share new ideas, this is what I imagine. I imagine a community where safe place means a place where you're loved and valued even as you struggle. New ideas can often be uncomfortable. You don't want safety from discomfort. You want safety to know you're okay even when you struggle with the discomfort that's part of learning and evolving. Learning and evolving as individuals and as a community. This is so important. And it's important to foster spiritual growth with vibrant religious education for all ages. Spiritual growth is a lifelong journey. The UUA Commission on Institutional Change report emphasized over and over and over that the work of equity and justice that we're called on to do is best done when it's rooted in our core spiritual beliefs. It is in mining the depths of our spiritual beliefs that we find the courage and inspiration to face our mistakes and embrace a new way of being together. And I'll tell you, it is just a joy to talk to our young Unitarian Universalists. I learned so much when I talk to them about our faith. We are well served to continue to give them a good religious community in which to grow and grow as faithful people. And we benefit when we include our teens in leadership and decision making. To keep them engaged and become our new leaders, we need them to experience their value in the community, not just washing dishes, but actually being at the table where important decisions are made. Your future vision has a fantastic sense of looking outside your own walls. You use phrases like local community and beyond, and being an arcing bridge to other groups. I love that phrase, the arcing bridge. One of our lessons from the pandemic, as well as the climate crisis you mentioned so often in your vision, is that we are, all of humanity, all in this together. We are truly living in an interdependent web. What we do matters to other people, and what they experience matters to us. Our relationships can truly be with anyone, anywhere the internet can take us. We can be in relationship with people in Bozeman, in Boston, and in Bangkok. We can hear and see injustices that happen in our own backyard and across the globe. Our youth already get this. It's time for the rest of us to catch up. The world is diverse and multicultural. We belong to a big human family that spans across oceans and time zones. To not engage outside of our walls is to not face this reality. One imagining I want to share before the end of my sermon is not so much about the post-pandemic church, but it's about the pandemic era church we're in right now. Not what our congregations will be when it's over, but what they have become in the face of this strange time. Never would I have imagined the level of dedication, compassion, innovation, and flexibility I have seen from our UU congregations during this pandemic. When it became clear that we needed to stop meeting in person to keep each other safe, we did what we had to do. So often I saw fine results. Many members who swore they would never do online worship have girded their loins and found a way to take part using this new medium. People have reached out across communities by phone to check in on those who are absent and isolated. In a large number of congregations, financial giving has remained strong as people really feel how important their UU congregation is to the world. It has been truly impressive. If we bring the strength and determination with us into the future, I can only imagine what we can do to build a better world. May it be so, my friends.